What is the ultimate purpose of life? According to the Advaita Vedanta teachings, it is to realize that our true self is infinite consciousness, and being infinite, it is the reality behind the world of appearances. As human beings, we are blessed because we have been given the instrument that makes this realization possible. That instrument is our mind, with its higher potentialities. For our progress to enlightenment, we must mind our mind, but in a special sense. An analysis of its contents and past history is not necessary. What matters is our willingness to cultivate serenity and to free our thinking from all unfriendliness. Then our mind, significantly stilled and purified, will start to unfold its higher intuitive potentialities. As our inquiry progresses, we'll discover that what we really are is not the mind with all its struggles and limitations, but the ever-free, ever-perfect, self-luminous power that reveals and supports everything. At all stages, it is our inner state that matters. Why is this so? Because it's what takes place in our mind that determines our happiness or otherwise, and our capacity for self-development. Many people who appear to have all desirable things on the material plane may inwardly be full of sorrow because they are deprived of inner peace. Others, more humbly placed, may be blessed with sweet content. This implies that our joy depends more on our inner life than on our outer circumstances. Through meditation and other key practices, we learn how to enter more deeply into ourselves, below the surface thoughts, below the currents of emotion, to the still depths, where the pearl of peace and joy is to be found. The discoveries made in the inner realm are, in a quiet way, revolutionary. For what is discovered goes far beyond the highest flights of thought and imagination, and is concerned with reality, not illusion or speculation. This inner quest leads to the realization of conscious immortality. By virtue of this divine origin and basis, the mind has the capacity for self-transformation. Not only can it make a heaven of hell, but its destiny is to transcend both heaven and hell, and to lose itself in the absolute freedom of self-realization. Therefore, let us regard our mind not as a fixed endowment of known resources, but as a fund of almost infinite potentialities. These potentialities can be awakened through the proper means. Our mind, being teachable, can be transformed through self-culture. its present state is largely the outcome of our past choices. Its condition, from this moment onwards, is in our hands. With patience and perseverance, our personality can be remade, not for its own sake, but so that it may serve as a pure channel for the divine light and life. Hidden within our individuality, its final secret is the treasury of higher experience. Every inquiry is encouraged to consider some basic questions that will lead to our awakening. Then let us ask ourselves, what's the purpose and aim of this unending stream of thoughts and feelings that accompanies me through life? Is it possible to convert this abundant mental energy into a higher form of expression? Is there a fundamental core of my being which stays unmoved and unaffected by the changes in the mind and transcends the radical change called death? Does each thought contain its own little packet of energy, its own natural luminosity, or does it borrow its power from some deeper and constant source? What is it in me that knows the rise and fall of thoughts? These are deep questions for our reflection. They all refer to our experience here and now. The higher wisdom is not concerned with investigating the details of our past life. What really matters is what we are thinking of and reaching for right now. Neither Krishna, Buddha, Christ, nor Lao Tzu were interested in reviewing the past life of their disciples. No teacher of universal truth wants to check our curriculum vitae. If our aim is liberation, we do not need to worry ourselves about the past. The present moment is the root of our existence at all times. What is always present in the present moment is the ground of being and consciousness. Our aim in turning within in stillness is to detect intuitively that deeper ground of being. The Mahatma Swami Ramatirtha, whose name Rama, as we know, is the name of God, once came under the suspicion of the police. 2 detectives were sent to question him. He welcomed them, saying, "You've come to detect Rama?" "Yes, to detect Rama, your own true self, the infinite reality hidden in your own being. This is the detective work that will make you happy forever." In this way, he drew their attention to the inner inquiry into the light behind their own personality. For the fact is, our personality is like the outer court of a sacred temple. We have to pass through this outer court into the inner sanctuary if we want to discover the imperishable treasures at the core of our being. We have to, from the outer court, pass into the inner sanctuary. For here is a realm that is totally free from sufferings and limitations. This realm is beyond personality, yet it is the fulfillment of all our longings. Deep down, we are all thirsting for total inner freedom, pure, unconstrained joy. And such freedom and joy can only be realized by awakening to our true nature. How real is this teaching? Is it possible to discover something at the core of our being that is without limitations? Abiding at this level, even now, is the realm of sublime peace and freedom. It transcends thought and feeling. Ever still and undisturbed, it is uninfluenced by the states of our mind. Just as the sky is undisturbed by the cloud formations that may tint or darken it for a time. The great principle within us is more than real. The word reality is a pointer, not a description of that which transcends all concepts. Returning to practical matters, let's now look at what might be viewed as a practical aid to self-discovery. It concerns our thinking. If we consider the way our thought process works, we notice that our thoughts appear, not simultaneously, but successively, one thought following another, replacing its predecessor. We experience a plurality of thoughts, not one long thought. And from this, we can infer that logically there must be a break, a gap, an interval between one thought and the next, even if that interval may last for only a fraction of a second. And this characteristic of the thinking process, the discontinuity of our thoughts, is the basis of a traditional practice in self-observation. The practice is inwardly to observe our thoughts and try to be alert to the interval between one thought and the next. Then, with practice, to extend that interval. Perhaps this interval becomes more noticeable in poetry, where the expression is broken up into short lines of words. And for example, in this haiku, our life is but a day. The wagtail flicks its tail, and lo, our life has passed away. Each line represents a thought. The thought comes to an end. A new thought appears, related, but it is not the same thought. Let's spend a minute or two doing a practice based on the way our thoughts appear and disappear in the mind. So, we'll do this together for a minute or two. Become aware of your thoughts. Observe them carefully, noticing where one thought ends and the next thought begins. Try to be aware of that momentary gap between the thoughts. Now, this kind of self-observation will reveal to us a crucial fact about our inner life. One level of our inner being is made up of thoughts. But there is something more that is always present in experience. This is a deeper level, highly subtle and most inward. It never appears as a thought itself, but knows the thoughts from the inside. Who is this knower of thought and of the interval between thoughts? Unlike the thoughts, the knower of thoughts does not change. It is something in us that is fixed, eternal, ever itself. We can ask another question. How do I know my thoughts and feelings? How do I know my intellect so that I can say, oh, now my intellect is lively and so sharp, or now my intellect is tired and dull, I just can't grasp this. These mental phenomena do not possess their own light. They do not know themselves. They are known to that single, unchanging, ever unmoved knowing principle that witnesses the thoughts from a deeper standpoint at the core of our being. This principle does not just know the thoughts, it reveals them. It is the revealing light, the source of inner light that makes our mental life possible. Just as in the physical world, all objects are revealed directly or indirectly by the light of the sun, so too our inner being is lit by a kind of inner sun, and that sun is our true self. And just as in our perceptions, we only see light as colors reflected back from objects and not in its pure form, so too in our inner world, our attention is given to thought and not to the light that reveals it. The light of self seems to be identified with the mind and its limitations. Liberation means realizing the independence of the ever-conscious self, and that it is the light behind the mind. This involves learning to withdraw our sense of identity from the mind to the self. The Zen masters speak of the pure self as our original face. Show me your original face, the face you had before your parents conceived you. This original face has become seemingly concealed by the illusory web of thoughts, fancies, associations and memories that make up our mental life. The original face is our pure I. When we say, I think, we have I plus something that is not I. Our aim is to calm the mental process, pause, stand back, and witness the thoughts rather than be identified with them. We need to see the thoughts, not to be the thoughts. The thoughts are transient events. Their only support and ground is our sense of identity with them. Once the independent nature of our true I has been realized as the only substantial reality, our inner freedom will be known as ever achieved. For that ground is the infinite light of consciousness. The inner sun of the true self stands independent of the physical and mental changes. It is ever free, pure, and perfect. Can we realize it through philosophy and reasoning? We can infer its existence by reflecting carefully on the facts of our inner experience. But its nature transcends the mind's power of reasoning, as it is the ultimate light under which the reasoning process takes place. The true nature of that inner sun is the supreme reality of the universe, divine, infinite, and perfect. Its realization is accomplished not through the help of those its realization is accomplished only through the help of those who themselves have realized their identity with that light. Yes, we do need help. Their words are recorded in scriptures and other inspired writings. From them we learn that the essential light of our being is transcendent. The inner light is in a different order of reality from the material it illumines. In the Gospel of St. John, it is called the light of man. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. That was the true light, which lighteth every man. The spirit of man is the candle of God. This Old Testament proverb signifies the same inner light. Our inner being is animated and enlivened by a spark of celestial fire, so to say, and this light bears all the characteristics of its transcendent source. The mind, as it normally functions, is finite. But there is infinite light at its source, and this is the light behind the mind. This light is our true self, our true I. Nothing in our inner being deserves to be called our true self, except this undying, unwavering light. For everything else is passing and illusory. Our true nature is the light. So this light of consciousness may seem to be a function of our ever-changing mind. If so, it will come to an end when the body ends. But it is not so. Consciousness as self is the great reality in which all minds abide like clouds in the sky. As our opening verse declared, the highest self is a light which illumines all intellects and is illumined by none. Consciousness is not conditioned by time and space. Unlike the thoughts which come and go, have a beginning and an end, nothing can show that the illuminating consciousness changes or ends with these thoughts. This illuminating consciousness fills the whole of experience everywhere. It is constant through all time. It doesn't become old and tired because it is not material. It is the supreme transcendental light and is the true nature of every human being. To those who have fathomed the secret and have learned how to disidentify consciousness from the mind, this infinitude and universality of the true self is self-evident. And here are two short verses that point to the same truth. In inner silence, watch the activities of your mind. Then experience forever the bliss of self. Realize the inner meaning of life and sit in silence. Smile secretly, merged in the divine vision. With such a vision and understanding, impulses to war and conflict become meaningless. Another verse says, how can the person of discrimination who sees the same oneself in the friend, in the enemy, and in his own body, feel anger, any more than he could do so against the limbs of his own body? How can we discern this light behind the mind as a matter of direct experience? It is nothing objective. And there is a saying in the Upanishads, you cannot know the knower of knowing. It is yourself, immediate and direct. This light of our real self is in its true nature transcendent and infinite, but in a certain sense, its light and peace are reflected in our mind, as the limitless sky is reflected in a dewdrop. This reflection of consciousness is the animating force in the mind at all times, but we're not normally aware of it. It is only when our mind is bathed in peace and harmony. It is then that the special nature of this reflection of consciousness in the mind becomes apparent. It is like the reflection of the moon in the water. If the water is agitated, or if its surface is covered by weeds, it will not reflect the moon as it is. Its image will be at best a shimmering smear, or there may be no reflection at all. Clear the weeds. Let the water calm down, and the image becomes progressively clearer. Inner progress to enlightenment involves achieving an increasingly clear reflection of the spiritual light in the higher part of our intellect. Let us ask, what is the true well-being and fulfillment of the mind? It is brought about through our growing sensitivity to this ultimate light of our being. What is the end point of this development? The realization that one is oneself the light, and that there has never been anything except this light. This is the truth that underlies our experience. And in the words of the Avatud Gita, know the self to be infinite consciousness, self-evident, beyond destruction, enlightening all bodies equally, ever shining. In it is neither day nor night. From the standpoint of truth, nobody is high or low. What matters is whether we know directly our true self, or whether we are in the dark about our inner treasury. Does it have to be direct knowledge? Because if so, that already assumes a certain mastery that we simply don't have. And the answer is, indirect knowledge, or knowledge derived from books and lectures, prepares us for direct knowledge. So we should pursue indirect knowledge as much as we can through our study and our acquaintance with people who share the same goal. And as you know, to help us on our path, there are many affirmations that remind us of our reality and also of the true value of our mind. For example, I exist forever in the Divine Sun, the Self. My mind reflects its light, peace, and tranquility. The next affirmation goes a stage further and leads to a statement of our true identity. My mind rests in contemplation of the ever-shining light in my soul. That light am I. And the third affirmation implies transcendence of the mind altogether. I am light, and in me there is no darkness whatsoever. Well, I've chosen the second affirmation for our reflection. And it is this: my mind rests in contemplation of the ever-shining light in my soul. That light am I. So let us hold this thought in our mind for a minute or two. You will notice that the sentences we meditate on are nearly always in the present tense. They point to the eternal fact at the core of our being. And this aspect of our nature may appear to be hidden from us at the moment. But the truth is that our real self transcends the world of duality. It is infinite and is to be discovered within. And finally, we may ask, what about the Supreme Reality or God? Is it something over and above this self-knowledge? And the non-dual position is indicated in the lines of a mystical poet. How can one who knows not himself know God? True self-knowledge is knowledge of God. It is this wisdom that unites mankind and points the way to liberation from error and delusion. Let us end by recalling the verse we started with. The highest self is a light which illumines all intellects and is illumined by none. It stands motionless and is independent of the stream of thoughts. Thank you for your attention, friends.